Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this webinar put together by Maritime Heritage Trust and National Historic Ships. We hope you'll find it interesting. We've got some very interesting speakers tonight, and I'm most grateful to them for volunteering to take part. And if you've just heard, this webinar is being recorded. So this is one of a series on critical issues for maritime heritage and preservation. The first was on the 5th of January with Dan Cross, Richard Titchener, and Hannah Cunliffe of National Historic Ships. And you can find the link to that recording if you look up Maritime Heritage Trust on YouTube, or if you go to the Maritime Heritage Trust web page and to events, and you'll get the link there as well. The next event is going to be on the 24th of March, and that's going to be looking at more at the specific benefits of health, well-being, community benefits, skills, and things like that. And that's going to be chaired by my colleague Hannah Cunliffe of National Historic Ships, and Victoria will say a little bit more about that later on. Before we begin, and I should introduce myself and say to those of you who don't know me, I'm Henry Cleary from Maritime Heritage Trust. And Maritime Heritage Trust, as you may know, is an umbrella organisation, membership organisation for the maritime heritage sector. And we got going, you may remember us as Heritage Afloat in the early 1980s. And later on we merged with the Maritime Trust, which has a very distinguished history going back to 1971 and Prince Philip helping it to get going. We're actually currently asking all our members what they think are the important issues for the health of the sector, to try and reorient what we do. And if you have got any views or comments and would like to be involved in that, please do get in touch with us, and you'll see the links at the end of this. So the focus of this evening is how we reach out and attract new people, not just enthusiasts and volunteers, but people who may like what we do, whether that's on social media or they just want to drop by and see what we're about. Maybe just a nice place to have a coffee or a place to bring the kids. Lots of people are potential supporters and allies who may not want to get their sleeves rolled up and start with an oily rag and a spanner. And if we're to survive, we have to reach out and build that wider community, because their support may actually be even more critical to our survival. So what we're going to hear tonight is several different aspects to that from people who are engaged in this area. And I hope you'll find it an interesting experience. And if I can just now introduce our speakers. First of all, we're going to have Ash Fair-Ring, who is the, you may know him from his social media activities, which he'll tell us about. And he is one of the new generation of crowdfunding boat restorers. And he, with his team, are restoring a sailing barge, yacht Growler. And after that, we're going to have Charlotte Squire, who is the project manager for the SS Fresh Spring, which is a unique steamship in Bideford and Devon. And they have a very ambitious and interesting program of community education and skills activities. Then we've got Liz Power, who comes from the nearly maritime London Museum of Water and Steam. And one of the reasons I asked Liz if she would take part in tonight is because of the extraordinary way in which the London Museum of Water and Steam and Liz's team responded to the pandemic, and the way in which they made the facilities of the museum available to the local community, made it a really fun place to go, and have given the museum a new profile. So Liz will tell us a bit more about that. Then Gareth Meyer, who is director of Raybell Charters, which is a very interesting sailing barge restoration project, which is far more than just a sailing barge. It's a community project, it's an environmental project, it's a heritage project in the widest sense. And you'll get some of that from Gareth's presentation. And then lastly, but certainly not least, Victoria Walworth, who is the Policy Projects and Course Manager at National Historic Ships UK and leads on the Shipshape Network initiative. and on skills training and other related projects. And she has helped develop National Historic Ships promotion and engagement strategy with online events and social media. And just before I shut up for a bit, can I say we really would welcome your questions and comments. So please put them either in the chat box, which you'll find at the bottom of your screen, if you scroll down to the bottom and go along the black bar, or better still, in the Q&A box, which is only seen by the panelists and isn't for discussion. But we'll have plenty of time for that at the end. So without further ado now, I'm going to invite Ash to start us off. And Ash, if you give me a moment, I will see if we can move on the slide.
Thanks, Henry.
So perhaps while I'm doing that, you can just, yeah, there we go.
Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for coming to listen to us today. I'm going to talk to you very briefly about my project, which is the rebuild of the sailing barge Growler, and about what you can do to create an online presence for your vessel in order to get lots of different people coming in. Just want to clarify that my social media or my product is no means a perfect example of how it should be done. I've just learned a lot of things along the way, which I hope can contribute to helping people build an online presence for their vessels. So yeah, can I have the next slide, please, Henry? Okay, so a very quick background to the Barge Yacht Growler project. So my name's Ash, I am 20 years old, and when I was 17, I was in a barn in Suffolk, where I came across this absolutely drop dead gorgeous third size barge yacht. These boats are incredibly rare. There are only about 10 of them left. I think only about 10 of them left. There were never many of them built, but they're very, very special boats, and a real example of a bygone age. So Growler had a very good life. She is based on the full-size Thames sailing barges, such as Ravel, which Gareth is very involved with. But she never traded. She was always a private vessel. She had a very good life up until the 1980s, when she fell into a state of disrepair and ended up in Woodbridge before being rescued and taken to Snape Maltings, and then taken ashore to a barn where she sat, where a rebuild was started, and then life, took over the current owner. And I found her, as I said, in 2018, shipped her up to Norfolk. And when I finished my A-levels in June 2019, I started rebuilding her. It's been a complete rebuild. When I got her, as many people know, I thought that it would be a couple of months and she'd be on the water before we do it. But two and a half years on, we're still ashore. As you can see, this is our latest photo. But the boat has been almost completely rebuilt. She's had a whole new keel, completely replanked. Well, pretty much about 80% of the planking replaced. All the frames doubled, pretty much a new deck, and the list goes on. So it's been an absolutely fantastic, very enjoyable project. And the whole thing has been funded through crowdfunding, which has been through donations, selling T-shirts, and lots of other things associated with that. And the long-term project of the boat is to start shipping cargo under sail when she's finished. So that's a bit of brief background to the project. Could I have the next slide, please, Henry?
Yes, apologies there. I got distracted.
No worries. So creating an online presence for your vessel. So when I started the project, I set up a social media and a website across everything. And now I've been doing this the social media has been up and running for almost 3 years now. And there are several things that I've learned along the way, which I found has really increased my following and got lots of people involved. As Henry said earlier, it's very important if this industry is going to survive, is that we need to get people who don't know about historic vessels, but love the idea of them involved in the projects. So number one is about bringing people into social media. And the best way to do that is to have really, really high quality images. As you can see, I've got a picture of my forehatch, which I recently built, which is the top photo. And it may not be the best photo in the world, but it's pretty good. And it shows a really nice varnished shiny hatch, which brings people in. Fun enough, for a lot of the project, I do all my photos on an iPhone. So I'm not saying you need to have a top of the range camera, but just something that takes a good kind of 4K quality photograph. And it makes such a difference. I mean, a key example is I got a new phone just before Christmas, and my following has gone up massively just because it takes much better photos. I think I've added almost 300 followers since Christmas. And that I would put down pretty much massively to improving the quality of the photos, but also the fact that the boat is in the stage where everything is looking much more shiny rather than the photo below, which is tar pouring out the scenes, which I love, but I take it it's not the most photogenic thing in the world. So yeah, high quality images is an absolute must, and it's very simple. Just get a good phone with a good camera, and it'll make such a difference, and it really brings people in. Because also lots of people follow. They don't just follow wooden boats; they follow the wooden boat hashtag or the wood hashtag. And if you're building something like a four hatch, this is made out of mahogany and Iroko, you get all the woodworkers in and all the kind of the woodworking nerds and stuff like that. So it's really good. It gets in a whole, different band of people in. Number two is videos. I'm sure lots of you know about videos, about how important they are. I have a YouTube channel, which I wish I did much more with, but in reality, as lots of you know, it's very time consuming process to make YouTube videos alongside a project. So I do as many as I can. And when I do, it's brilliant because I get lots more followers, but it's just about getting the right kind of work YouTube balance. But yeah, but to make up for that, I do a lot of videos on my Instagram and my social media, just short ones, me talking about the project, what I'm doing. And I find that's really nice because people can just sit and they can watch it rather than having to read, especially if you're at the end of a long day. I mean, I spend quite a lot of time looking at other projects on Instagram, and it's really nice at the end of the day just to watch a video of what someone's been up to. It's a nice kind of, very interesting way to end the day. Number three, regular content. Really must push this. This is an absolute must. If you want to, when you're building a social media account for your heritage project, it's a very long grind. You can't expect to see massive jumps. It's great if you do, but it's a long grind. I mean, I've been at this for almost 3 years, and you've really got to just keep posting and keep posting and keep posting and finding really good, high quality content, interesting content. I mean, lots of people do social media for companies as a full-time job. I'm not saying that you need to make it a full-time job, but you've really got to put time in. It's not just something that you do casually along the side. You've got to be I find you've got to be quite serious about it. So yeah, regular content, I'd recommend 2 to 3. I post about 2 to 3 times a week, and then lots of Instagram stories and lots of Facebook stories. Because people who are, having a quick break from work, that's what lots of people do these days. They scroll through their feed and they like to see, you're varnishing this or you're doing that, and it just gets more people involved. Hashtags. I'll be honest with you, I'm not a pro hashtagger, but it's something that does make a huge difference. I'm very keen on them, but there's lots of different strategies to get lots of people in, because you follow a hashtag. Lots of people follow hashtags, like I follow hashtag wooden boat or hashtag wood, and it just gets much more people into the industry. And as I said before, we've got to, everybody loves heritage vessels. They're so photogenic, they're so interesting, and so we kind of get a foot in the door with lots of people. So yeah, very important to do hashtags. As I said before, make sure your content is really interesting. I'm sure that all the projects that everyone's doing are incredibly interesting, but you've got to show people that. You've got to bring people in by making your social media content really interesting. And the key way to do that is just, what I recommend is just not write too much on all your posts. It's because a lot of projects write a very kind of relatively techie account of what they've been up to, which is fascinating for people like me who are very into wooden boats and heritage sail. But we need to attract all sorts of people. So you've got to make sure that when you're writing about what you're doing, is that it's not too long and it's accessible to everybody. So people who don't know about putting planks in can understand vaguely what you're doing. So what I recommend is just don't be too technical about it. Or if you do want to be technical, just do a nice introduction about what you've been up to, and then basically say the next bit's going to be, I know that the Tally Ho project out in America, which is a real benchmark for anything social media wise, they do an incredibly good. He does basically in his videos, if you want the technical part, keep watching. If not, skip to 6 minutes 16, which I think is really good. And you can also do that when you're writing about your project. You can say, if you want the technical part, keep reading, or if not, skip to paragraph 5. So that's something that I've picked up recently, which is really cool. I spent a lot of time because a lot of the people who have crowdfunded my project are not boaty people. They're not mad keen on sailing. They just like the project. And talking to them, their advice to me was that we're not so interested in the technical side, but we want to have a brief overview of how a project runs. So I found that's quite beneficial, and it's very important to get people who aren't so into boating and sailing, but like cool projects to get involved. And my final thing that I'm going to get across is showing passion. People love passion when it comes to projects, whatever the project. If you're passionate about something, it gets people involved. It gets people wanting to know more. Even if I've said before, even if they're not interested in wooden boats, even if they're not interested in anything to do with sailing or water, it's just about showing passion for the project. You've just got to show people through videos and through posts and through, hard work, just to show your passion for how much you love this project. And it gets so many people involved. I honestly, if you had to take two things away from what I've talked about, it would be, high quality images, because it brings people in, and you've just got to show the passion for the project, because I just can't emphasize enough how important it is and how brilliant it is. It just can bring so many people on board over a very short period of time. So those are the key things that I would advise you on for creating an online presence for your vessel and getting new people involved.
Ash, thank you so much. That was really great. I think if we could kind of bottle that and sell it, we could all of us could solve all our problems.
Well, you're very kind, yeah.
A high value awaits you, I'm sure. But thank you very much indeed. That really was good. Thank you very much. I'm going to go on now. A very different scale of project. In fact, one that would make many people think, gosh, really. And I think anybody, if you've been lucky enough to get a glimpse of SS Fresh Spring, I think you will be amazed. But in some ways, what's even more amazing is how much work has gone into building links between the ship and the local community. And Charlotte, who's been project manager for 3 years at SS Fresh Spring, operations manager, I should say, is going to tell us about a bit of that. So Charlotte, thank you very much, and over to you.
Right, thank you, Henry. First of all, Ash, I'd like to say thank you for what you've just shared, and you've made me realize I need to get a better phone to take some good photos, but really interesting, so thank you. Okay, I'd like to give you a little bit of background about the Trust. Fresh Spring was found in a very sorry state in 2010. She's a 121-foot steamship, and she's the last remaining Fresh class ship. There were 14 built, and she is the last one left. The Trust was formed in 2013, and funding was secured for her to be dry docked in 2016. And then that dry docking took place, and she was towed to Bideford in North Devon. Her role was to provide fresh water to the fleet, and most of her working life was spent in Malta. Next slide, please, Henry. So here are a couple of photos. There she is in Newham in the weeds in 2012. And then the lower photo is how she is today in 2021. It's slightly deceptive, the bottom photo, because she is actually a static exhibit. But that was her she was under tow and was being brought back from Appledore shipyard. But it's such a nice photo that, that we like to include it. Okay, next slide, please, Henry. So what's the Steamship Fresh Spring Trust done to try to attract new audiences? Well, from what I've just said, you'll recognize we're actually a very young charity. So we by no means have all the answers, but I'm just going to share the things that we've done and the things that we've found have worked for us. First of all, we've taken full advantage of our location. We're very lucky being in North Devon because it's a tourist destination. So we get a lot of people who are just coming down on holiday. And you know, it's an interesting thing to do, to go on board a steamship, but we're also next to the southwest coastal path. So we get a lot of people just walking past who may not normally want to engage with heritage, and we can be quite persuasive to get them on board the ship. We do encourage TripAdvisor reviews. This is quite new to us, but if I go anywhere with my family, I always want to look at the reviews beforehand just to get an idea. So I know it can backfire, but I'm hoping that we can be suitably professional in our offering to have TripAdvisor as a real positive for us. Now, we have had a variety of different events on board the ship. We did we crowdfunded for an awning that we've put over the foredeck of the ship, and it's given us a really useful space that's undercover. And we used that for our 75th anniversary celebrations. We included little steam engine rides in the car park right next to the ship to try and encourage families to come along. And we also had the author of the little children's book that we've got, which is called The Wish Fish. We had them doing workshops on board the ship. So again, really encouraging families to come and engage with the ship. I mean, we've also had art classes on board, and we're now looking into the possibility of an escape room and possibly Airbnb. So lots of different possibilities, and looking at drawing in audiences that aren't typically heritage, aren't typically maritime, just using the space that we've got in the location that we've got. The other thing that we found works really well to attract new audiences is working with partners. An example being we worked with the Burton Art Gallery, and we did a sea shanty and seafood event on board the ship. Now, I had no idea how popular sea shanties were, but there's a massive following to the sea shanty world. And we wouldn't have known about that had we not engaged with the Burton and this event. So just engaging with partners gives you a new perspective and opens doors that perhaps you wouldn't open yourself. The other thing that we do, our chairman gives a lot of talks to local groups, and he does a brilliant presentation talking about the history of Fresh Spring, but he closes his talk with a call to action. And he then talks with the groups to find out what they would want if they were to come and volunteer, or if they were to be more involved with the ship. And that's all about making sure that the experience is mutualistic. We want to know what they want, while we're saying what we really need, and that tends to reap rewards. Now, we do promote our activities on social media. I don't know that we do it quite as well as Ash, but we have a volunteer who posts every week. He's got a fantastic style. It's real sort of Jolly Jack. He's got nicknames for everybody, and he's got quite a following because of that. He writes brilliantly. But we also post all the events on Facebook and Instagram and on our blog. And we just try and target for the events, other sites that might draw in interest. And the other thing I would say is we are getting better at keeping an eye on our Facebook statistics, because when we do something, we need to measure it and see whether it is working. And I know it's not an exact science, but it gives you an idea of what people want, and just growing that following. Next slide, please, Henry. Okay, so what have we done to attract new education audiences? Because we do always say that Fresh Spring is an education charity that happens to have a heritage steamship. Well, COVID has stopped us going into schools and having ship visits, as I'm sure a lot of us are aware. But something that has happened is we've broken into the home education market, which was kind of by mistake. We had a home ed family come on board the ship, have a look around, and we got talking to them about the STEM box projects that we use. And these are essentially 6 lesson plans aimed at Key Stage 2 students. And it's all about starting with basic engineering, very hands-on, and just takes you through different stages of engineering processes. And this family used the project. They very kindly took photos and gave us feedback, which we posted on Facebook and on our blog. And then other home ed families have got in touch via Facebook. One thing I would say is make sure, if you have got a Facebook presence, etc., make sure that you check it and respond to questions, because there's no point in putting in the work if you then don't respond to people in a timely fashion. But we've now got a number of home ed families that are really interested, which is fantastic. We are starting to engage with schools again now. We've got a learning officer who's been incredibly tenacious, and she has enabled us to have, well, later in this month, we've got 250 Key Stage 2 children coming on board for a week. And they're going to be doing everything from climbing the mast to 360-degree filming, semaphore, rope making bags out of old sails, all sorts of interesting activities. And that's going to be a massive amount of work. but just think of the, the number of people that we're engaging with and their families, their grandparents, all these potential new audiences that we may well be able to engage with because of this work. Okay, next slide, please, Henry. Thank you. Now, I don't know about you, but we do struggle a little bit with a younger audience, which is why I'm so excited about the school's work that we're going to be doing later in the month. So we needed to really try and target younger audiences. School visits are obviously a really good in, because you get the family's interest, etc. as well. We've got virtual reality tours that we're going to be offering this season, and they're going to have an interactivity element to it. So we're hoping that this is going to appeal to younger people, perhaps gaming types. And ideally, we would really like the youngsters to be supporting our older visitors, because we're using Oculus headsets and this technology might not be terribly comfortable to the older audience. It would be wonderful if we could encourage younger people to engage with the Trust through this virtual reality technology. But time will tell. We have been working with our local FE college on a project called Technology Transfer. And this has enabled us to have a work placement student for 60 hours. He's been fantastic. And he's made us realize how important it is that we have a young person's view of the Trust, because I think there's a tendency to get a little bit stuck in a rut. And he's come in with wonderful ideas and things that just make us want to draw on that young person's experience. And being involved in that project has now opened doors for us to work again with the Further Education College and other partners on putting together a sort of blueprint for work experience programs. So again, new audiences, new young audiences, which is fantastic. And we also hope to form a youth board so that these young people who have got a bit of an interest in the Trust are actually going to be enabled to help with the decision-making process. Okay, next slide, please. So the other sort of approaches that we've used to attract new audiences, I would say, is just seeing ourselves, the historic vessel, as part of the tourism landscape. I feel like I've come full circle now, because I started off by saying we make the most of our location. And in a sense, that's very true. We are a holiday destination in North Devon. We want to join with other maritime and heritage organisations and possibly have joint tickets or passporting for visitors. And we do want to dovetail on the back of their events to open new doors. And I would say, don't be pushed aside if you're not currently viewed as a traditional tourist attraction, because you do have a tourism market value. And I think sometimes we just need to be a little bit braver and say, no, actually, people do want to come and see us. And we are good for the economy. We are, we have a worth. Please don't just push us aside. I would also say the Trust has got great trustees and patrons, and they've got a range of different interests, and that opens doors for us. And that is really, really helpful for attracting new audiences. We've got trustees involved with the local Chamber of Commerce and the Harbour Board. And I don't think the Trust would have made the progress that it has made this quickly if we didn't have those connections. Particularly our chairman manages to network and find opportunities in a way that I've never known anybody with such an ability. So we're extremely lucky with that. And I would say that seizing opportunity is important, really important, because you don't know which doors it will open. You don't know which new audiences you're going to be able to attract by opening those doors. But on the flip side of that is make sure that you have that the opportunities are within scope and within capacity for your organization. I've got this great diagram I like to use when somebody comes up with the next great idea. And it talks about core activities, adjacent activities, and transformational activities. Now, core is obviously what you're doing in your day-to-day anyway. Your adjacent are the ones that will lead you towards new audiences. Transformational is fine, but it's a long-term activity. And that could be introducing you to audiences that you didn't even know existed. So it's it's important to make sure that you seize opportunities, but that you do stay within your scope, you know, to a certain extent. And the next slide, if I could, please, Henry. And my final word, we all know that we need to extend our reach for the survival of historic vessels, but we mustn't turn our backs on our current audiences, because they're the people who have got us where we are today. And I know for a fact that SS Freshspring would not be in the fantastic state that she's in now if it wasn't for our volunteers. And final slide, if I could, please, Henry. And there they are, just some of our volunteers sitting on the mast that was donated, the wood that was donated for our mast. And we have a fantastic group of volunteers that we're well aware we need to support and nurture. Okay, well, thank you very much for listening.
Oh, thank you very much. That really was excellent. And the range of connections you have built up with the local community at all ages. And I was really struck by your point about home education, just as an example of that, of how, you know, you don't know where you can score a hit. Don't think that you know all the things that you can achieve for your project. But that was great. Anyway, plenty to talk about. So thank you now, and we move on to Liz, who is director of the London Museum of Water and Steam on the banks of the Thames at Kew Bridge. So, and a lot of steam engines, some very big steam engines, but actually Liz is going to give us a slightly different angle. Liz, over to you.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. I am an interloper here, so it's lovely because I've already learned so much in the last 20 minutes. I'm going to go to bed with a whole new world, which is always a wonderful experience. That's a really flattering photo of me up a ladder, putting up a banner. So I am the director of the London Museum of Water and Steam, which I know absolutely everyone on this webinar has been to, but just in case you haven't, it is in Hounslow, Brentford, West London. Kew Bridge makes it sound very, very posh, and it's definitely not. We're surrounded on all sides by high-rise houses. We are a 200-year-old pumping station, and our historical job was to pump water into central London from the Thames. It was filtered on what is now a giant council estate that just sits to the north of us, and then it was pumped by our enormous steam engines into central London. And our site was saved by volunteers in the 70s and has slowly evolved into the slightly bonkers museum that we are today. And it's lovely to come and talk to you. And it's really nice that a difficult decision has turned up so many positives. And that difficult decision was all the way back in summer 2020. And if you remember then, restrictions had been slightly lifted, and museums and visitor attractions were allowed to reopen again. And we were faced with the choice, do we reopen our museum for this summer? Or you know, potentially could have been forever at that point. And we thought back to the values we have as an organisation. And the key value for us at that time, out of our 5 values we have, was the word helpful. And we had to take a long, hard look at ourselves and decided that at that point in time, in Brentford, in West London, nobody needed static steam engines. And that was just the truth of it. We had people who were in their high-rise flats looking down at our empty car park, who didn't have a garden, they didn't even have a balcony. And no, they didn't need a static steam engine, they needed a place to play. And so that felt completely opposite to what museums should do. So we stayed closed, and instead we threw all our energy into producing a free offer for our local families. And we put chalks in the car park. I got 15 scooters off Facebook for free. We put toys out, and we turned the car park and our outdoor spaces into a riot of fun for the whole summer for the local families. And it was an absolute smash hit. We also opened the space up to community groups. If you've never seen a group of adults with learning disabilities doing Zumba in a car park with a museum for you, absolutely brilliant. People were in every single day doing different things for that summer. And then when we reopened in the autumn, before we reopened the museum to the public, we reopened the museum to our community first. And that summer, as it drew to an end, we started giving out golden tickets to people we'd seen all summer coming into play. And lots of them came into the museum for the first time when we reopened the doors just for them. So helpful. What can we do to be helpful? And that's all we really try and think about whenever we're thinking about an audience we want to bring in. What's going to be helpful to enable that visit to go smoothly? So it's not very hard thinking at all. So for example, we have lots of families come in and we really want to build that audience. In fact, they are our main audience now. What's going to be helpful for a family? If you've ever tried to visit anywhere with a small child, you know as an adult it is the most frustrating experience of your life, because you just want to read something, anything. I'm a person too, let me learn something. So what we have, again from the good old Facebook, we have put toys on every single space in our museum. And so the children play while you sneakily read something. We're just slowing them down. Really helpful for a parent who wants to feel like a human being. We have a water play space. Your child will climb in it. So we have a spares box of dry clothes that we give out for free. So the day carries on. You don't have to go home because your child sat in the water play. We have tons of craft. I mean, it doesn't matter how bad the colouring in sheet. Most parents are just grateful that there's something to do. And we try and do our kind of talking about our story at as many different levels as we can possibly do, but from storytelling to science shows all the way up to our theming days. So just every single time, is this helpful? Is this going to help somebody coming on a visit? And that's particularly true when it comes down to our local communities. One of the things we were able to do is we just have a blanket policy of sharing our spaces, much like Charlotte said, actually. Like, once you've got a space, you can do anything in that space. Guess what? There are no rules. We're making up the rules. We can put whatever we like in that space, and we do. So in our museum, which we were able to open while the council still had all the local community centres closed, we opened our museum for the local community to use. So we have everything from adult crafting classes, artists. We have a weekly toddler group that comes and uses the space with the Children's Centre. We have a council services drop-in about housing. So people come and talk to their council officers in our cafe space. We have anything that people think is a good idea. So anyone in Brentford on Saturday night, you can come and see a live radio show written about the football club by one of our local community members. They think it's a good idea. We're going to give it a go. Why not? It might bring some new people in. A big decision we made during the pandemic was to give up on trying to make a profit out of our cafe. It's just never going to happen. We just don't have enough people walking through the building to make that happen. And so now we have a new partnership with a not-for-profit provider who are a charity themselves, who work with young people with learning disabilities. And it's a training cafe. And they use the cafe for lots of different groups to meet in the space. They make the best lattes, and since they took over running the cafe, we have not had one single complaint about our cafe service, and we are absolutely delighted. So it is just about thinking every time, have we got everything that is going to be helpful for this audience? How are they going to feel at home? How are they going to walk in and know, this is a place for me, I feel right here. Just from this moment, we have lots of things being on our side. We're a tiny team. If they see us on social media, they're going to meet us on the day. It is really personal. I have people arrive and they think they know everything about me, and I'm like, oh, how do they know all that about my family? Oh, because I put my family in the films that we put out. So it really feels like a personal, genuine connection that they have with the organisation. And why is this all important? And actually, I think Ash and Charlotte said the word that I believe is the most important one, and that's love. We need people to love these things. They love these places. If you're going to post on Facebook that you love the place when it closed, it is too late. I need you to love it way before then. How long is the queue going to be at the council complaining when I run out of money? Probably longer now than it would have been 2 years ago. More people love us. More people care. And we have two of our amazing volunteers who actually came in and started volunteering when they were children, surely illegal now, but they actually were there climbing in our engines when they were tiny. Their love for our museum is now what keeps those engines running. They lead the engineering team that keep us alive. Instilling love in every single person who could potentially be connected with us is what will sustain our future. Thank you, Henry.
That was fantastic. I think all of us are going to be going away really with fire in our veins to try and follow you in some small way, Liz. I think that was great. Well, now we're going to go on to a project which is again really pushing the boundaries, really challenging, starting from a traditional maritime heritage position, but actually reaching way beyond that. So, and here to tell us about that is Gareth, who's director of Raybell Charters. And what I'm going to do now is stop my screen sharing and hand over to Gareth, because he's got some far better illustrations which he can share with you. So Gareth, shall I hand over to you to introduce what you're going to say?
Yeah, sure, Henry. Yeah, we'll give it a go. Yeah. Okay. So hello, everybody. Yeah, very happy to be. I hope I can add something extra to some great talks and presentations that we've had already. There's a little bit, some similarities, but hopefully some extra things in here too. I was very struck with Henry's note about inviting us all to this, about the fact that it is an experimentation and we're all sort of trying things out. And we are too. I think it's really sort of important to recognize that. I'm very aware that we're a young organization. We've also got we're still doing a restoration. You know, we're not at that operational stage that the Steam Museum is, and Charlotte's sort of spoken about down there in Devon. That's a sort of big challenge ahead of us. But anyway, I thought I'd just sort of rattle through some of the things which we have been up to over the last few years. And the main thing to sort of get across is the way that in going about that, we've really sort of shifted our thinking away from being just about the restoration of a historic boat to I think really seeing ourselves far more as a maritime social enterprise, or maritime heritage social enterprise, almost sort of regeneration company, really. So it's just an expansion of what we're up to. I'm going to try and sort of share my screen now. So maybe, I don't know how, somebody can sort of give me a shout.
So if you go to the bottom band, Gareth. Yeah, well done, great.
Is happening, yeah. So great. Everybody has got that. That's our logo. Just get going. Okay, yeah. So here we are. But yeah, we start with a boat. So this is Raybell, 1920s Thames sailing barge, built in Milton Creek, Sittingbourne, and they're on the launch day in 1920. We had some funding. We received funding from Heritage Lottery Fund to restore Raybell back in 2019 in Milton Creek, Sittingbourne. So we're sort of taking Raybell home for this restoration, which is lovely and was a very sort of attractive thing for the funder and also for the local authority. It gave us a lot of support on that application. But there were a couple of issues with it. One of it was that Raybell wasn't in Sittingbourne when we had the funding confirmed. So she was at Heybridge Basin on the mud there, and had to be taken back with another barge leading the way across the Thames, up Milton Creek, and back to the restoration location, which was Lloyd's Wharf at the top of Milton Creek. The other thing about that was that there really wasn't an awful lot at the top of Milton Creek at that point. Sittingbourne has this most amazing history and heritage of barge building and barge building and maintenance, but it's almost all completely gone. There's virtually nothing left of that physical infrastructure at all. It's in people's memories, it's in people's family histories, and there's a lot of pride around it, but there's no sort of facilities there at all. So it was a good bit of time spent literally in the mud, getting that sort of berth and location prepared, having to bring in the equipment where we were going to do restoration tasks, taking off the mast, getting prepared. managing to secure a dry dock and tugging that up to the top of the creek and building the frame over the top for it before the actual restoration work could start. We really got going on that just over a year ago now, and principal work has been in the bow. The bow is sort of slumped of Ray Bow, had to be jacked up and put back into position before work could start to rebuild the strength into the bow with lots of our new timbers. Frames were done all the way down along the sides on both port and starboard. And then more recently, we decided to go on to the deck planking, rail outside, covering boards and rails to come quite soon. So it's starting to speed up pretty quickly now. And that, yeah, so that's the restoration story. Since this is the bow now almost fully restored. But alongside all of that has been this series of community activities, and connections with the community, which have been at least as important, if not more important, than the restoration work itself, I'd say. And that image I showed of the wharf is relevant to this as well, in a sense, because in the same way that there were no facilities to do a restoration, also the wharf itself had been sort of closed off to that community. So it wasn't a place where people had been used to going. They might have gone there when they were kids and sort of sneaked under the gate type of thing, but it was basically a sort of a derelict, boarded off site. So we've had to find ways to bring people down and even sort of know where it is. You know, it's almost become hidden to that sort of level. So there's sort of 5 or 6 ways that I say that we found to do that. The first is volunteering. So we have a regular crew which turns up every week now of volunteers. They become very self-supporting. They sort of share skills, some of them teaching others what to do. I'd say that that's become easier as we've gone through the work. The beginning was quite hard to get volunteers really involved. And this has got a relevance to sort of things which I'll come on to talk about in a moment. It's just that the level of skill involved in some of those tasks is just so high that it's been quite difficult to get volunteers involved in some of those things. And just the environment, just like the constraints around where they were working were very tight as well. But as it's gone on, some of those tasks have changed, and we're beginning to get volunteers able to get much more involved in that work as well. Second way is training. So at the level of people who have got some skills through college work or school work and have got a pretty firm idea that this is a direction that they'd like to go in. So we've got a couple of assistant shipwrights on the project. To people who are just sort of finding out what they want to do, sort of trying things out, maybe a bit new to sort of like work environment, and they're just using this as an experience. So we've got both of those things happening, and a lot of sort of skill sharing happening across those two. The third way is, this relates to Ash's talk right at the beginning, of really sort of sharing all the time what it is that you're doing. So we do a lot of Instagram posts. We have a YouTube channel. This is a post from just a couple of weeks ago when the storms were going on, and we lost. So telling that story, just keeping people up to date with what was happening. I'll miss out on that. The other thing is telling the story of the history of the barge and why we want to do it, what hopes we've got for the future as well. So we've got an exhibition which is running alongside the restoration site. That gets people down, but we're also now going to take that out. So not just relying on people coming to the wharf, but also then going into going into the library, going into other locations like restaurants and bread shops and just other places which have shown an interest in wanting to host us. So more people get the chance to see it through that. Telling that both the history of the barge and what it did, but also looking for individuals. So this is an artist who was very involved in Ray Bell in the 1950s, so telling his story and the sort of paintings and art that he produced when he was doing it. This is Uma Thurman's mum on a Vogue shoot with Ray Bell in the background. So nice little personal stories there. Another way is just finding lots of ways to provide bigger events regularly. And we've got sort of a similar format for marketing and promoting these now. Always do barge tours for those. That's a sort of very popular aspect of it, taking people around the restoration, looking underneath it, and then getting the chance to post about that afterwards and inviting some feedback on it. Giving people a chance to try things out under some supervision and at whatever level really suits them. Connecting to the events of other people. The Sitting Board had a 1920s day in the summer, which we participated in, Ray Bell 1925, so that made sense to do that. Took us up to the high street, so again, away from the wharf, getting to people who otherwise we might not have been able to speak to before, but then bringing them down in the evening. So they found out about it during the day, and then in the evening we were hosting a music event and more chances to go and have a look at the barge, have some food, have a drink, enjoy what was a very, very lovely sunny evening. And doing it regularly, so keeping up with the seasons, so finding the chance to do something which is appropriate in the summer, but then having Christmas or winter events or spring events. So doing these regularly so it gets into people's minds that there's something likely to be happening every couple of months down at the wharf. The next one is really about creativity. So finding ways to use the heritage of the barge and the heritage of the site to inspire people's creativity. And this is really extending the range of the audience through these sorts of activities, whether that's on learning about the heritage of the barge and then doing photography projects, or whether it's screen printing, or whether it's textile making. So all of these things are sort of like people are responding to the project. They're not about, if you like, the restoration work, but it's responding to the heritage of that restoration. And that sort of could be it. That is sort of like the H&F project. It is the restoration work and the community stuff alongside it. That could be the end of it, but it sort of isn't. And again, this sort of goes back to this picture of what the site looked like when we were there. And we began, and this was partly a pandemic thing, because it was closed to the restoration work. We began to think, well, what else could we do? What new things could we do here? Whilst it's very, we couldn't have open days or things, but can we start to do things which will prepare the site for more visitors when we are able to open up again? So we put together some ideas about how we could transform this site. I've got another project going up alongside it, funded by the local authority. So as it looked like that, it then began to look like this. We began to get some sort of more life and green and colour into it. It began to look like this. It began to, once people could start to come back, and then we were having these sort of open air events where people were coming together and doing gardening or woodworking, and we've got a peace run. So when we're hosting the events, then there's more stuff that we've got to offer. It's a bigger facility, it's a bigger offer than just coming and looking how we're getting on with the barge. We looked at the history of the wharf itself, so not just the barge now, but looking at the history of the wharf where we're doing the work, and its heritage as a connection to a very big local paper mill that was there. We gave that to a local artist, sort of inspiring and creating a sort of welcoming mooring to the wharf. Yeah, some beginning to look after and getting more ecological interest in the scrubland and a little bit of grassland, which is there. Doing some ecological surveys, seeing what we could find. So then that begins to connect us to some other people, whether that's the RSPB or I can't remember the name of this, so I'm going to call it the moss experts, who came and had a look and sort of identified what mosses and lichens we had on this site. So all of this is sort of like bringing in new people, bringing in people with new interests, because you get other new ideas. So this is a math and bossy bat and moth identifying evening. So that was something which we ran over the autumn. And once you start to do this sort of stuff, you sort of it becomes a bit of a habit, really. And so we've gone from that and just sort of seeing opportunities as they've arisen to the very latest project we've got is another creek. This is Deptford Creek in London. So now we've gone away from not just being a restoration project of a barge, not just about being in Sittingbourne in Kent, but we've extended our reach and our range and come into London to do a project which is about the history of the Deptford Creek, its connections to trading, colonial trade, and particularly around the 17th and 18th centuries in London, and a heritage project with young people living around there, which is going to lead to some performance of theatre work on the Cutty Sark and the Master Shipwright's House, which used to be part of the old Royal Docks in Deptford. Yeah, and if I've still got time, I just sort of like, I was really sort of conscious of the point that was made in one of the previous presentations about where do you go, how far do you go with this, and where do you still know that you're within scope? I think for us, I think it is really, really important to do that and to define that. I think for us, it's about, we're always looking for things which are about a connection between trade, economy, and environment. So it's using and thinking about heritage in a way that helps us think about the future, which we know has got to be around zero carbon or low emissions or carbon constraint, basically. So those are the things, really, that's sort of like the scope, that's sort of theme which is running through everything which we do. And links to the final thing which I'll talk about that we're involved in, which is this nascent sail cargo movement, which connects us to a French ship, which comes to London, but also goes to Colombia and to the Caribbean, connects us to coffee farmers in Colombia and raw sugar panela growers in Colombia, coffee loaded onto the ship there, it connects us to Portugal and to some olive oil family farms, loaded onto the ship in Porto, brought around, and then coming to Ramsgate in Kent, where we put it onto a Thames sailing barge, which one day will be Ravel, but it isn't yet, and brought up the Thames estuary and into London. And here again, we're trying to find all the time, we're trying to find things which connect us to bring people into that story. So we provide the opportunity to go not to the Caribbean, you could do that with the French ship, but for us, we can provide the chance to go on the trip up the Thames, which you don't have to commit quite as much time to, and to come to the docks, to purchase the produce which has been brought across, and we sort of makes an event out of all of that. Chance to come down, meet crew, hear more about the story, meet other people who are sort of connected to it, basically, and to tell our story. So all of those things, I don't know, they go off in different directions, but I hope there's a sort of like a core and a central purpose to it. I think that's an important word in all of this. It's sort of purpose and a sense of what will bring people in is if they feel that this is a project which is helping to create a future, a different future. I think that sort of like sums up how we see ourselves as connecting people with heritage and what we do. The purpose is what is inspiring and just sort of pulls people in. It's exciting for people. So as a very sort of quick summary, I think there's the things for us that have come out of that which have become sort of themes or topics for in our direction have been that one about being alert, always looking out for opportunities, not being too bounded by thinking that you're just a boat project, or you're just a maritime heritage project, or you're restricted to a restoration or something like that. Have some urgency about it. We know the restorations particularly take ages, so don't sort of think about when we get to finishing the restoration. It's also about what happens during the course of that restoration. Diverse governance, so if you're bringing in a range of ages and gender and ethnicity, you're going to get a whole load of bubbling ideas there which you're not going to get otherwise. Being networked, being connected to other local organisations and being able to offer them something which helps them to deliver what they do. And the final one, which maybe we can talk about in the discussion, is sort of convincing the funder. It must have been so hard in the 70s and 80s when there wasn't a funder. There is now a funder of heritage projects, and how we sort of communicate what we're doing back to them, back to Heritage Lottery Fund, I think is sort of key to the survival and all of the good work which all of the organisations in this sector are doing. And that's me done. Was that really over time?
Gareth, thank you very much indeed. That's great. Fantastic.
Lovely.
I mean, you pushing the boundaries. You're telling us that you're pushing the boundaries. So that's what we want to hear. Now, our last speaker tonight is going to be Victoria, and then we'll have a bit of time for discussion. Victoria is going to tell us about National Historic Ships, and they, if you just give me a moment to Victoria, over to you.
That's great. Thanks very much, Henry. There's some really good talks to follow on from there. But hello, everyone. I thought it would be helpful for me to talk a bit today about some of National Historic Ships initiatives that we use to promote the sector, and how we can work with you to develop your online presence. Next slide, please, Henry. Though I'm sure many of you are familiar with our work at National Historic Ships, I'll just start by giving a brief overview of our main activities. We're an advisory body set up in 2006 with funding from DCMS, and we have a wide remit, but our key areas of work are to offer independent advice on all matters relating to historic vessels across the UK. So this includes advice to government, the National Lottery Heritage Fund, and other grant-giving bodies, as well as to a huge range of stakeholders and vessel owners. We manage and maintain the National Historic Ships registers, which currently list over 1,700 craft. And we help regenerate and sustain the supporting skills and infrastructure necessary to maintain and conserve vessels. And we share best practice, connect the sector, and raise the profile of maritime heritage to reach new audiences. And of course, that's really what we want to focus on tonight. We're a small team of 5, and we do operate with a small budget of only £220,000 per year, which covers all of our core staff and running costs. So for us, and I'm sure it's the case for everybody here tonight, we're always looking for ways to increase promotion on a modest budget. So one of our key promotional tools is our annual awards programme, which includes our Flagship of the Year award, which has been running for the past 10 years. This awards vessels on our national registers based on their operational programme and their ability to promote the sector at events that they attend throughout the sailing season. However, over the last 2 years, we've had to revisit our awards criteria due to COVID and lockdowns. And so we set up a new virtual flagship award to reflect the impact of the pandemic and celebrate the creativity that vessels have shown in developing new online engagement packages. So our first virtual flagship winner was HMS Belfast, who were marking 70 years since the start of the Korean War, with increased press and social media activity throughout the year. And last year, LV50, who you can see in the top left picture here, became our virtual flagship of the year for their new online resources, which included a virtual tour, key stage 1 and 2 learning materials, and wider social media engagements. We also celebrate and promote the volunteer workforce that supports our sector through our Marsh Volunteer Awards, with both group and individual categories. In the top right image here, you can see last year's winners on board Steam Tug Kern. And in 2019, we created our Excellence in Maritime Conservation Award in memory of our late director, Martin Heighton, which recognises vessel projects that really encompass the principles set down in our guidance manual, Conserving Historic Vessels. And in the bottom left picture, here you can see our first winners of this award, the Windermere Jetty Museum, who won it for their photogrammetry project, to conserve Ferry Mary Ann. Next slide, please. Thanks, Henry. And of course, we run an annual photography competition, now in its 13th year, which was set up to engage new audiences. And as an added benefit, we get these wonderful images of vessels, which we can share online, and they help us create our calendars. We have different categories that are aimed at attracting new audiences, and this has included a young photographers category in the past. And we have a People's Choice Award that uses Instagram to allow the public to vote on their favourite images. And last year we started a newcomers category as well to encourage submissions from people who haven't taken part in the competition before. Next slide, please, Henry. But as a result of COVID, we had to take our award ceremonies online. And so in 2020, we hosted our first virtual award ceremony, which involved creating a film with pre-recorded introductions and acceptance speeches. And we posted the results live across our social media feeds. This actually ended up giving us a much larger audience than we might normally have. Our in-person events would usually include about 100 guests, whereas our first virtual award ceremony attracted an audience of nearly 2,500. And our second last year reached 1,800 people. And then on top of that, we also then had that added interaction across social media. So it's been a really positive move. We're going to do the same again this year. And by creating a film, it allows organisations to properly showcase their vessels and their teams that are on the ground. And it creates material for future use. So you can re-watch the ceremonies online via our YouTube channel. And we can create short clips from the films to help with future promotion. So I'd certainly say that if you're looking to develop your online promotion, film offers a lot of possibilities. And as I think we've touched on with some of the other talks as well, you know, there are different levels that you can pitch it at depending on your budget. So it might be that you're just doing a film into an iPhone. It's fine, put it out there. Next slide, please, Henry. Another core tool for promotion we have is our Shipshape Network, which is an initiative that we launched in 2010. It's an online resource created to connect vessel projects with businesses and organisations, as well as raise awareness of supporting infrastructure and skills. Today, the network promotes over 100 projects across 8 zones and features over 800 organisations on our free skills and facilities directory. Each project has their own webpage that we update with key information and latest news and events, which are also shared in our monthly newsletter and across our social media. So this is a really great way for organisations who either just want that extra bit of promotion, or perhaps they don't have a website or their own social media channels to get the word out. We'll work closely with you to create that web page, and we can offer advice and link you up to other projects with similar interests that can help grow your expertise and your profile. Also, we've developed partnerships with organisations across the UK who we've designated as Shipshape hubs to act as our ambassadors on the ground. To date, we've launched 5 hubs, and we've got plans to launch another 4 this year. And they'll play a key role in helping to support vessels in their local area by sharing knowledge and resources, hosting networking events, and identifying routes for funding. Next slide, please, Henry.
Sorry, let me just.
Perfect, thanks. So I'm conscious of time, but I thought I'd briefly talk about some of our own online events and projects just to share ideas. I'm just pulling up 2 Shipshape Network events on the top line here as examples. The first was to celebrate the network's 10th anniversary, and the other are virtual hub launches. Both of these events followed a similar format with posts across Twitter, Facebook and Instagram, shared every half an hour to collectively tell a story. We advertised these events beforehand to encourage people to engage online, and our increase in followers shows that we've been able to reach new audiences with them. And also by connecting with organisations through these events, we were able to promote their vessel projects and shine a light on key topics that I think affect us all, things like training and volunteering and funding. And then the bottom picture here relates to an online gallery from our photography competition images that we created in partnership with Arcade Limited through the Heritage Alliance during the early lockdown months. We created a virtual school trip for London primary pupils where they could virtually interact with the gallery. It had a chat function and they could leave 3D emojis. You can probably see the pandas there. And they were asked by their teacher to choose their favorite images, create their own sketches of the images, and imagine what it would be like to be on board. Next slide, please. Thanks. So just a quick summary here on how we can work with you to help promote your projects and find new audiences. So first thing I would say is follow us on social media if you don't already. As I've said, our main ones are Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. We are also on LinkedIn and we've got a YouTube channel. Take part in our annual awards programs because that will allow you to be part and connected to that larger promotion. Create a ShipShape Network project page with us if you haven't already, and also just keep in touch with latest news and events, which then we will share on social media and in our newsletter. And also take part in wider online events with us. Just an example here, Mental Health Awareness Week is between the 9th and 15th of May this year. We'll be posting throughout that week to highlight how interacting with maritime heritage can have an enormous benefit to mental health and well-being. We want to share case studies during that week, so do get in touch if that's something that you'd like to be a part of. And also just some of our own top tips, lessons learned here when it comes to social media, and I think we've touched on a few already tonight. I would say that you do find new audiences by using different social media platforms. I know that everyone's got their comfort zones, but it is something to have fun with. And just as an example, we over the past few years on Instagram have found a much younger audience there than we would find, for example, on Twitter or Facebook. Follow and engage with other organisations to build your own audience. The more people you follow, the more people will follow you back. Use existing hashtags that are already widely in use so that you're then joining a wider conversation. It's fine, obviously, to create your own hashtags. That's no problem. But as I think, as Ash talked about as well, people follow hashtags and it's easier to just dovetail on something that already has traction. Videos and images, again, has already been touched on. They'll definitely get a better response than just pure text posts. And ultimately, you want to tell your story. So find your online voice and try and stick to that. Is there something that you really want, as we talked about, sort of core messages of organisations, how do you get that across online? Go behind the scenes. Everybody loves any sort of post where they get to feel like they're getting to see something that they wouldn't get to see anywhere else, and it does draw people in. And it never hurts to try something different. So I've talked a little bit just about Instagram being something new for us over the past few years. Well, we've done some things such as Instagram takeovers. Ash is a veteran of one of these, where basically we ask organisations to actually just take over our Instagram for the day. We actually have one coming up this weekend with an intern of ours, Abby Allen, who will be taking over our Instagram to talk about climate change. You can also do things like live feed events where you're looking at skills in action, Twitter chats, basically anything that encourages engagement and conversation with your audience. Next slide, please, Henry. And just to show you here, this is something we put together to break down the different social media channels, how they can be put to best use, and tips that you might want to consider when creating content that I've touched on a few just now. I know that there's a lot there in that slide, so I'm very happy to share this after this talk so that you can refer back to it. Next slide, please, Henry. And finally, I just wanted to flag some resources online that are really helpful for breaking down the digital world and sparking ideas. So I won't go through all of them, but I can share these links with you again through Henry after the talk. I'd just like to mention the top one on our list here, which is our online learning resources page, which collates different tools created by vessel organisations to enable them closer working with schools and the younger generation. It's all about sharing ideas and working working together collectively as a sector. So again, if you have your own resources that you'd like to share with us, please do get in touch with us and we can put those on our website. And the second on our list here is the Heritage Digital Initiative, which is headed by the Heritage Alliance and funded by the Lottery Fund. The project aims to increase the amount of free digital skills training and support that's available to heritage organisations. So if you visit their website, you will find a range of free toolkits and guidance materials to help increase your online promotion. So I've covered a lot there, and I feel like there's still much more that we can say. So please do, again, get in touch if you have any questions about the ways that we can work with you. But of course, very happy to answer any questions in the Q&A just now. But thank you.
Thank you very much, Victoria. That was great. And as you said, we'll send around some of those key slides with the such as the one on social media and the contact one. So that's great. I'm conscious we haven't got a lot of time left. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go around each panelist in turn and ask you to pick up points that have arisen so far that you think would be useful to comment on. And Ash, would you mind if I started with you?
Yes,
and I noticed that one of the questions to you was, how do you know when it's reasonable to ask people to make a contribution?
Is this the question that says, will Ash explain how to generate income out of followers?
More or less, yes.
Yeah, brilliant. Sorry, yeah. No, I've actually been. I read this a bit earlier, and I was just been thinking about it. Basically, how to generate income out of followers? It's quite the key thing when it comes to generate money out of followers. I found is having people there are basically people donate to a project in different ways. Some people like to just donate some money, which is very nice. Some other people like to buy things, and you've got to have both options because everybody's different basically. So on the way that I've done it is I've got a kind of online store with like t-shirts and tea towels. There's 2 examples of things I sell, and so when it comes to posting, I don't like to shove it down people's throats when it comes to donating money to projects, because I appreciate that lots of people following my project who don't want to donate to it, but like following the project. And as we said before, it's very important to look after kind of all different types of people who follow projects. But when it comes to generating money from generating donations from it, every couple of weeks I say, oh, dude, if we've launched a new product, like I've just launched a new tea towel or something like that, I say, oh, please do go onto our website and have a look, see if you might be interested in buying one. And that's the same with t-shirts. I've also capitalized on selling sales on the boat in the future, and I think that is a really top seller because people love the idea about being able to sail on the boat in the future. So they are getting something for their money. And it's very useful for me because when the boat goes in the water, I will spend a long time taking people sailing. It's going to be that's going to be another long project. But yeah, that's how I've generated money out of that. And when it comes to crowdfunding, at the start of the project, and yeah, so 2 points in the project, I had crowdfunding programs, and again, you promote that for your project, you share your videos. Again, make sure you don't. Well, people can do it how they want, but I don't do it the whole time because, as I said, it's nice that people can just follow the project rather than be tried to force donate. So yeah,
that's great. Thank you very much. Sorry to land that one on you, but I'll come back to you in a moment or two. So if there's anything else you want to pick up, Charlotte, were there any points arising that you'd like to comment on?
I did see one question in the Q&A about my comments about trying to keep things in scope to some extent, and it's difficult, as Gareth has picked up. You can't be too narrow-minded and too focused on what you think you should be doing and that this is just a renovation project, etc. But the comments that I was making was having the thought about whether this project or this piece of work is core, so that's the stuff that we're doing all the time, or whether it's adjacent to that, which is just sort of reaching out to another audience that perhaps we've thought about. The transformational, which I think is what the question was about, is really something almost off-piste, and it would be a potential audience that you hadn't even considered. And that doesn't make it bad. That's fantastic in many ways, but it's just making sure that if it is a transformational piece of work, that you have the capacity to do it, and that you have a time scale put in place, because that transformational work is going to take a lot longer because it's further away from your, you know, your bread and butter work. So that's what I meant when I said transformational. It's not that it's bad, it is very often good, but it just needs more planning, and you need to make sure that you have the capacity, you know, the skills and the time to achieve that.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thank you. Right, Liz, would anything come up that you would like to comment on in the chat or the Q&A?
Well, I think I've spent too much time on land. That's been my main takeaway from this evening. I was really struck actually by how similar all our solutions were. And it really is about kind of listening and responding to the needs of the people around us, and being a bit brave, I think. Is if you could give this another talk title called "How to Be a Bit Brave and It Will Be Okay." You know, try something. It might work, and if it doesn't, it's probably going to be okay anyway. And I think that's been a real takeaway for me this evening. And maybe we could all try and do something a little bit brave tomorrow that will really kind of make a difference and might set off one of those transformational things that eventually become core, that eventually change everything. You never know.
Great, fantastic, great. Gareth, what about you? Did you pick up any particular items?
I quite like this. I'm not sure I've got an answer to it, but I quite like this question or point somebody's raised about this link between vessels and land, or historic buildings and ships, and to say linking heritage vessel to museum connected to its cargo, the people who have carried it. I think it's this idea that we sort of do need a home. We've got these wonderful things we sort of go around, and we can be mobile, but there's sort of the connections you can make with community really are about place, aren't they, in many ways? And yeah. So it's getting some sort of balance on that, and having a presence somewhere where you are based when maybe you're out sailing. For those of us who've got that sort of, you know, ship which goes off and sails somewhere, how do you sort of still maintain a connection with the place where you were built or restored, or you've, you know, that you can call a home? Yeah, it's a good one, and I think it is another partnership one. It's about having those local links with organizations that you sort of you create a sort of common bond with, I think. Yeah.
If anybody would like to sail up the Thames to come and see me, I'd be delighted.
There's a lot of bridges.
Yes, yeah, there's definitely that.
Small, low blokes only.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Thames barges got up to you all the time.
They did. Yeah.
So you know, you're pushing on an open door there, I think.
Yeah, we'll definitely come once we're ready. And we should organize that. We could, you know, this is what I mean. It's like you could have multiple homes, but having somewhere to sort of to go as a destination. So, you know, if we knew we could go as far as the Steam Museum and you could welcome us there and host us there, then that's generating interest on both sides, isn't it?
Right, make it happen, Gareth. We'll talk.
Yeah.
The ship has arrived in port.
Yeah.
The community celebrates.
Yeah. Yeah.
Victoria, practical question for you. Are you able to help people with social media costs? If a project wants to spend some money on promotion and some of the things we've been talking about tonight, how can you help them?
Yeah, absolutely. Good question. So we don't have, if you like, a sort of direct grant fund for it, but what we do have is our awards program, which is, I think, another way for us to financially support projects in that area. So as we talked about, we have our flagship awards program, and there are cash prizes to be won with that. So for just an example, the National Flagship Award is £500, or you could have your operational or static or virtual award, and that's £250. So we're aware it's not huge amounts of money, but that is something that you could put towards digital outreach in any way, shape or form. So it could be that you're wanting to create a 3D tour, and you might want to focus that on some social media outreach, or split across various different projects. But I'd say that that's a really good, that is financial support that we can offer for people wanting to improve digital. I mean, I would just note that with the good thing about social media is that there are so many free options out there, and that it is so accessible to everybody. And so the other things that we can really do is work with you on your social media. I mean, our Twitter, we've got nearly 4,500 followers, Instagram 2,500. So I appreciate we're not Kanye West or anyone like that, but they're quite large numbers, that through sharing with us, you'll be able to sort of galvanize on our audience through that. And we can build, there's ways in which as well that you can build on that shipshape network relationship that we can build with you into, for example, funding applications that you might want to put out there to help with your digital or any other areas too. So it's about identifying how that shipshape network relationship can really work for you, working with your local hubs and partnering with other local projects, and just explaining to the funders that, for example, you could be partnering with National Historic Ships to put on some sort of online event, and that's improving your outreach. So it's just trying to show them how you're able to work with us on that. And that's something, again, that we can offer some advice on. Thank you very much. That's great. I mean, also, I mean, Victoria mentioned a number of the things that are available online, help to get your, online presence even more appealing. And one of them was Heritage Digital. But can I also mention Rebuilding Heritage, which is another program launched by the Heritage Alliance. And there are quite a few things on that. Quite a few of these sites have recorded videos, which are quite good. The reason I've highlighted what's the point of view is it's quite a challenging piece. It's quite gentle in a way, but it's well worth watching because it makes you realize how your project might be viewed by somebody who isn't remotely interested in it. Because some of those people are potential supporters and you can win them over, but it all depends how you go about it. So that's one that's worth looking at. What we'll do is we'll send round all the contact emails and kind of useful information. And also I'm conscious that we may not have had time to go through all the questions. So what I'll do is I'll review the comments and questions with the panel, and we'll send you a response. We'll send it out to everybody who logged on to this program tonight. But just before we finish, I'll just quickly go around and see if anyone wants to make any concluding observation. And can I start with you, Victoria? Anything you'd like to say? I think the main thing that I probably would take away from today is that there's already a lot of stuff that's out there that is accessible, whether it's advice directly from our sector or from other sectors, and it's just knowing how to tap into that. So if you haven't already spoken to other projects that do something that you would like to do, or you want to approach us, please do, because there's always something that we can do with you, and we're always up for being a bit creative as well. So
Great.
I think just so long as we can keep talking to each other.
So as Liz said, be brave, it'll probably be okay.
Good advice.
We're going to remember that. Okay, Gareth, any final comment?
No, only really just to say I'd love to hear from anybody out there listening, interested, would like to make contact. Open invitation. Always ready to talk to anybody who thinks they've got an interest, got a connection, got something they'd like to do with us. We're always alert.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Liz.
Well, thank you very much for the invite. It's been such a treat for me to come out of museums and into ships for the night. It's been wonderful. I also love chatting, always available for a coffee over Zoom, and happy to talk to anyone about pretty much anything. So please do get in touch, and I'm totally going to get a barge to come up the Thames to be greeted by my community. I think that it will happen one day, so to watch this space.
Thank you very much. That's great. Fantastic. Charlotte.
I think it was the helpful comment that Liz made that's really resonated with me. And when you listen to the presentations that everybody's given, that even if we didn't recognize it before, that is actually the basis for a lot of the work that's going on. So I think that was, Liz, that was really helpful. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Ash.
Yeah, I was just something very similar to what Gareth said. You know, it's really important that we all kind of keep talking, and you know, because the more we share our information, the better we can get at this. So yeah, I'm always very keen to talk and chat about historic vessels. So yeah.
Excellent. You are our hope for the future. So, you know, we feel inspired every time we see you in action. Thank you very much. Thank you very much, all panelists, for taking part. And I'll be in touch, go through the questions and contacts, and I'll contact you just to make sure you're happy with that. Thank you very much for giving the time. Thank you to the audience. Thank you for taking part. And I hope you found it interesting and stimulating. I certainly have. And good night.